So why is it Sila Samadhipanya, or virtue, meditative consciousness, and wisdom? Why is it that way? Why is it sequential? Because if you don't have Sila, if you don't have virtue, you haven't been engaging in virtuous behavior, your whole mind states are going to be distraught. You're going to be filled with craving, you're going to be filled with ill will, you're going to be filled with greed, you're going to be filled with delusion, you're going to be filled with all different types of defilements and distractions. How about Witchikitcha, which is this desire to go, like mania. Or how about sloth and torpor? Oh, here I am, so you. That's why. And so really the Sila principles and the precepts are something you shouldn't be even thinking about. You should just be doing. That's where you really should bring faith. And say, if this is what they said to avoid, this is what I'm going to avoid. It's just a recipe, like a food recipe. How do you make this meal? You need these ingredients: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. You can move it up to 6, 7, 8. There's a lot more you can add, but they're considered too difficult for the beginner. But they're certainly not for the more intermediate. But for the beginner, that's just the basics. That's what you need, like milk, butter, eggs, and salt, and yeast. That's it. Don't have it, it's not gonna really work. It's not gonna work. So just make sure you have those 5 materials, and they're readily available. Readily available, because it's all dependent on you. All dependent on you and your behavior. So you are a sovereign, living human being. Of course you are. So can it be accomplished? Of course it can. Why wouldn't it be accomplished? Well, because you end up sabotaging yourself. But you don't have to do that. You can recognize when you're going to do that, and you can stop that. You can also take proactive steps to not put yourself in a position where you could be tempted. That's being really proactive. That's why people go into monasteries, because everybody knows the rules. And it's the social norm to keep the rules. And there's no funny business going on. Certainly not to the extent that you could encounter it in the real world. Like when you're sitting you're meditating at the monastery, some Swedish bikini model in a thong bikini doesn't lay down next to you and start oiling herself up for her sunbathing ritual, okay? So there, you don't have that temptation. Now, even if she did that, that doesn't mean you have to even open your eyes and look. Maybe you'll open your eyes and you'll realize, poof, that was just an illusion. Because maybe you haven't eaten for 3 days, and these things start to happen. You know, monks have been known to be tempted in the wilderness. So that means even outside the monastery. And there's explanations for that. There's a nice friendly explanation for it. That you can think of Maya as a trickster. Like the Maya, he's of a very. It's supposed to be his kingdom here, right? And it's the sense realm. He's the highest of the sense realm. So why wouldn't he try to throw you for a loop every once in a while, just to reassert his uh, supremacy in his realm, the sense realm. But the spiritual realm goes beyond that, and can go beyond that, and does go beyond that. But doesn't mean he's not going to throw throw a screwball if and when he can. Of course he can. Places you wouldn't expect. And then you're back in circles and walking in circles. You're back in samskaras, wandering around aimlessly in the sense realms like a padujna. But you can get into that state and then you can get out of that state. It's just the less virtue you have, the harder it will be, or the more impossible it will be. If you're saying, well, wow, this precept, no, it's just, that's too much for me. Well, that's how much less samadhi you'll have, meditative consciousness. And that's also consequently how much less wisdom you'll have, how much less progress you'll have. So do see it in those terms. Of course you don't have to follow the precepts. Nobody, the normal Padujana doesn't follow any of the precepts. And the normal Padujana has none of the benefits of wisdom. Because wisdom, really, you do have to think about that in a more all-encompassing way. Wisdom is the best of the best. Wisdom is a lot better than dumb people think. All of the problems just miss you by a mile. When you're wise, they miss you. Even if people would say, oh, that hit the wise man, it didn't hit him. Didn't hit him in the same way that it would hit a Padujana. Just think of all the breaking glasses that the wise person already knew were broken. Just think of the difference in suffering between a wise person and a fool. The wise person doesn't suffer. The wise person has nibbana. The fool is burnt up in a living hell in this realm before he goes to the hell realms. So, but within samadhi, that's where the chitta, you can feel it just burning. And it takes a while till you can orient yourself to what in the hell is going on here. Like, what is burning? What is putting the screws to me or to you? What is going on here? And then you'll see, okay, this is regret. This is anger. This is blame. Let's let that go right away. Like, drop it. Like, dude. And you clear out that department. Then what is the next thing's coming at you? Oh, I should have been this. I should have been that. Oh, this is self. Let me hit the non-self button. Oh, this happened in the past, and this should have happened instead. This is, again, a form of delusion. The worry about the future, regret about the past, boop. Those departments get emptied out of the dukkha. And then there's just layers of it, just layers upon layers upon layers. But if you stay in samadhi and you're skillful because you know what's going on, you're not just identifying. A lot of times takes a long time, but you're just sitting there looking at this form of dukkha and suffering and dissatisfaction. You're like, what is this? Like, what? But if you're patient, and you will eventually stare through it, and that's when you have a satori moment in samadhi. Because these things aren't visible in the physical world. You're in the spiritual world. So then you pierce at some point, if you're patient and your practice has been hardened and weathered a little bit, the click will come. This is what it is. This is this form of dukkha. And then you grasp it, and it just goes out a different level. You free up more space. Like, oh, I don't have satisfaction. Well, you know what I'll take instead is sunyata. So I'm just on the feeling of this, I'm going to realize, I'm going to conclude that this is some form of dukkha. So I'm just going to get rid of it, drop it. I'm going to focus on something else. I'll return to the breath till it goes away. There, I turn around, it's gone. Next time it comes, maybe I'll gain more insight on it. But if it never comes back, I don't care. I'll take sunyata every time. Sunyata, there's no disappointment in sunyata at all. There's nothing in sunyata. Pure peace is one way of looking at it. You can turn sunyata into equanimity. So that would be the more, let's say, non-thinking way of utilizing samadhi. It's just whatever comes up, just get rid of it. You could do that practice. Just do it for a day, then maybe a week, and then maybe 3 weeks. And so on and so forth. Until you want to become a scholar monk and start figuring out what type of defilements. You don't need to figure out what type of defilements you're dealing with, certainly not in the beginning. It's best to just get through it. How about this? Yeah, the attachments to self. Like, oh, this identity, like I did this, but... and then here's one way. You can either hit the non-self button, which doesn't necessarily work all the time. It does work as a concept, but you can say to yourself, it had to be that way. You hit the fatalism button, and that's how you create closure, because you want to blame yourself about something that you regret. Hit the fatalist button. That was my karma based on my imperfect virtue. But that was then. And it's now the past, and the past does not exist. Doesn't exist in reality. It doesn't exist in samadhi. Or it shouldn't exist in samadhi. See, samadhi gives you the perspective to see it, and then your practice gives you the power to drop it. And that's where there's just so much baggage for a lot of people that don't have these skills. It's just, again, like a filthy diaper that they never learned how to change. Never learned how to drop it, right? Drop it in the bin. Never learned how to wash themselves off either. Never felt the freedom of being diaperless and putting the dukkha in the pot where it belongs. And also expecting, as a human being, and especially with your fatalistic experiences, you're going to need regular dukkha removal for the foreseeable future. And that's really okay. You're being compassionate. How about this? Yes, basic compassion. How do you get basic compassion? Well, you need beneficence. And because it's nearly impossible to be beneficent towards others until you're beneficent to yourself, you start with others. Like, oh, I'm a pigeon. When next time you see a pigeon, wish that pigeon well. Not just that pigeon, but all pigeons. Every time you see a pigeon, do that. Then, believe it or not, when you see a pigeon fly, when you see a pigeon walk, when a pigeon comes visit you, after you've been in that practice, it'll remind you to be compassionate towards others and towards yourself. Being compassionate towards yourself in samadhi is really essential. Because the natural reaction for someone who's been brought up tough is to want to punish yourself more for being defective or being weak or not being just being affected. It's if you get hit with an arrow as a warrior, you're gonna be mad more at yourself than you are at the person that hit you. It's a strange way of thinking, but it's just the way we're built. But it really wasn't your fault. First off, fatalism, right? Karma. That's number one. This had to be this way. Could not have been different. So right there you sever all things attached to the act in the form of self-blame, which is completely and utterly counterproductive, and yet it's so automatic, it's so ingrained, it's so compulsive that it's really hard to get a handle on, but you can do it. So you can certainly do it in samadhi. And when you do it in samadhi, that bleeds over into even your non-samadhi states. Because samadhi is the process, wisdom is the result, and the wisdom stays with you even when you're not in samadhi. That's the goal. That's when it becomes automatic. But you can't build up that repository of wisdom until you sort through things in a state of samadhi. So that's really the goal, especially for beginning practitioners, and that's the hardest thing in the world to do for beginning practitioners. Because it's really counterintuitive. But that's also why they say get into a practice, because you're not doing it because you need it, it's just because you do it every day. And then in those samadhi states, you're going to see, and you're going to start reading the book of the chitta, the heart, right? You start going page by page. So I think a book is a nice metaphor. I like the pinball machine of the chitta. Like, doop-a-doo, you just start playing your pinball machine. Or it starts playing you, and you start playing back with these different principles. Okay, boop, fatalism, karma, boop, non-self, boop, 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 boop. This is dropping, dukkha, dukkha, nirodha, boop, 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 boop. And you're playing this game. Right, the game of the soul, the mind, the spirit. And you're not going to give up. You can keep putting in, as long as you sit there and do it, you can keep putting in the quarters. 1 quarter, get lost this game. Let's wait a second. Let's focus on the breath. Maybe we'll come back to it, maybe we won't. There we go. All right, let's put a quarter. Some quarter flies out from the universe, flies through sunyata into the machine, and then the lights light up again. Do 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 do. Ding ding ding, and then whew, the ball goes boom 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 boom. the pinball chitta. Because let me tell you, sometimes just totally unexpectedly, there's no good reason for it. Just you're getting blasted from multiple angles. You wake up on a Saturday morning, should have no troubles at all, and the chitta pinball machine just starts up. Boop, 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 dooka here, dooka there, dook, 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 regret here, regret there. So, to come back again to virtue and the karmic consequences of not being virtuous, well, that creates the difficulties, that creates all the frictions, that creates all the distractions that are not only going to hinder you getting into samadhi, it's going to hinder your practice, it's going to hinder your routine. It's going to throw you off balance every time. It's going to weaken your wisdom machine. And so your results are going to be anemic or not at all, and your suffering is going to be potentially immense. Like you're going to be adding to your suffering, even if you foolishly don't think that to be the case. And it's gumming up your observational abilities, even without you realizing it. So, virtue is important, and you can increase it. Like, how about this? I'm not real big on sleeping on the floor, but there's army cots, for example. They're very lightweight, very robust, and they don't have any cushioning on them necessarily. They're just the tension on the material make them somewhat buoyant, but they're certainly not soft by any measure. And so if you're in a stationary position, I don't see anything wrong with it. Or how about a hammock or something else that you can stretch? You could also put it relatively low to the ground, but so that you're at least not disturbing other critters and other critters aren't disturbing you. You could put it maybe 8 inches off the ground or 16. But that's a precept. That's like the 7th or something like that. Then how about this? Not eating afternoon. So from dawn to noontime, you can eat whatever you want, but not afterwards. And so what will happen is you'll say, all right, well, because of this routine, you'll get to see all the cravings that come out of nowhere, all the temptations, and they're really rather ridiculous. But what it does do is it betters your practice, right? It turns life into a spiritual gym. And so when that really ridiculous, stupid craving comes out of nowhere, it's just ridiculous to you, but you're able to get rid of it. So if you're able to get rid of those cravings, you can get rid of other not so ridiculous cravings. But you can start seeing them as ridiculous and as cravings because you're in that practice. And not only is it good practice, but it's really healthy too. You will not be fat if you stick to that, if you're not a total glutton. Now, it really does depend on how much workload you have. If you have a physical workload, eat more. If you don't need to eat more. It's really that simple. And so it's for you to judge what is really appropriate. Too thin is not good. Too fat is not good. So there's your window to work with. Whatever is good enough. So, but yeah, the bed or sleeping on the ground, that's just, it's like, don't get comfortable. Don't get soft. Don't get into luxury. This is your reminder. This is the way you live. You don't need luxury. Oh, don't not touching money. How about that? So imagine that this major value of the Paduginos, money, money, money. You don't touch money. You've taken that precept. That is, how much more radical can you get? If you want to stop greed, to adopt a precept like that, money becomes disgusting to you. Like, no, I have this precept. Here's this person throwing money at me. This dude is complicating my life. This dude is trying to mess me up. That's how you see it, rather than the Padugianistic way, like, oh, where can I get even more of this? What else can I do for you, sir? Completely different way of seeing things if you have that precept. And so it goes on and on. There's like, I don't know, 200, 500, 1,000 different precepts. You can come up with new ones for yourself, but it's always helpful to look at the old ones. Gain a lot of insight that way. But look at your original Padugianistic self when you encounter those precepts like don't touch money, like how that just seems so crazy to you. But just think how crazy you look to someone who's put money behind them. Because you can't take money to the grave, fool. And the monk is beyond death. You know what's a great idea? Is letting go of grudges. Don't die holding on to a grudge. And you could die at any minute. When you think you can't, you're delusional. You're not making your heart beat right now. Let go of all grudges. And when they come back, let them go again. That's how you do it. You can't say, oh, I let go of that grudge now, but then you take it back up. As soon as you stop your practice, you need to be practicing all the time. Because the time a grudge is sticking to you, it's lost time. It's sapping everything. It's connecting a bridge to aversion. And this aversionary thing that you're connected to, it's an illusion. It's a cognitive framework matrix. And let's just say it was devised by a self that was not very skillful. So you can let go of the self, and you can also let go of a grudge. I think we live in a fascinating, abundant universe, full of light, full of life, full of unimaginable beauty, full of nibbana for those skillful practitioners. It's infinity, ready and waiting for you if you can get there. But you can also get yourself worked up about this birthday cake and that traffic jam, or that person said this then, and I wanted this but I got that. It's that you can get lost in a labyrinth of that. That's what it is to be an unskillful human. That's what it is to be a Padujana. It's so understandable. It's so normal. But it's also not super normal. by any stretch of the imagination. It's this annoying thing today, because I'm annoyed by things every day, because I'm an unskillful person. These people, it's funny, they have bad attitudes and bad practices, and they start off young. Let me tell you, the older you get, you see these fools. They burn out fast. They think they're tough people, hard-headed people, stubborn people. You age real hard that way. You wake up angry every morning, and you stay angry all day long, and you go to sleep angry. To just imagine, just on the level of neurology, like the electrical charge that is going through your entire muscular skeletal construction, your entire body contracts on microscopic levels based on your levels of irritation. You see it. You see the physical reaction. Have you ever seen someone get angry? Probably just 5 minutes ago. Their whole face gets red. Their face puffs up. They change like a fish. They hunch over. Their back gets hunched. You watch them like their shoulders. Do you know how much force is being applied for a body to be contorted with anger? It's a frightful thing to behold, and lots of stupid things happen when people are angry. They'll pick something up and throw it. Well, that thing might be a rock that can kill someone, smash somebody's face in, hit somebody else they weren't planning on hitting. All different types of things happen because their cognitive facilities shut down. It's like a blue screen on the computer. You're hitting the button, stop, 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 and there's nothing happening, but there is something happening in the machine. It's shredding all of your data. It's ripping itself apart. It's possibly going to reach a meltdown, and then the circuit board's fried. The thing is busted. So, but until that happens, you don't think it can happen to you or to others even. Everything's fine. Then just one stupid thing happens, and these people, because they're just ticking time bombs of unskillfulness, just one thing could set them off to explode, and the stupidest thing happens, and it completely destroys their lives and the lives of others. That's what anger can do for you. So you think it's a chic being angry, or it's has that sexy feeling to it, a sexy self-important feeling to it. This is important, otherwise I wouldn't be angry. Well, disconnect all that. Every part of angry, look at where it's holding itself together and take those things out. Like, don't even care if you break it. Like, get a stick, just hit something so the whole reasoning of getting angry goes away. Is it egotism? Hit that. Self, hit that. False self. That's a good one. That's real low-hanging fruit. That's like hitting a knee, It will work. You can hit somebody in the face, in the stomach, whatnot. You come with a hit to the knee, especially if it's a murderous person. You drop down real quick. That's one punch. The fight is over. Now, the unskillful person's fight has just begun, because now their life has become even more ridiculous, more filled with suffering, not just of the physical kind. How will that just limit your entire life? Perhaps being a cripple. But maybe that was your fate. Maybe that was your karma. Maybe that's your ride around this carousel this time. That was what you needed to experience. And so you can do that without being angry. You can also take a different option. Maybe you can say, all right, given the situation, this is a foolish person. I'm not going to injure this person. So I'm just going to avoid this person. Like, this is the thing. Angry people are usually really stupid. How do boxers win fights? They get their opponent to become angry. Start throwing haymakers. They sit back 3 minutes, just dodging and weaving. And then they come in with the strikes. Boom, boom, boom. Maybe a 3 combination, and that sucker is down for the count. Boxing is a skill, and so is samadhi. Because the samadhi is the ring where you have meditative consciousness. You actually are able to see what punches are being thrown at you and from what directions, and it's as dynamic as a boxing ring or wrestling ring or whatever other matrix you want to think. MMA, that's what it is. MMA of the mind. And anger is a fearsome component, contestant, contender, fearful. If anger gets you into its grips and starts strangling you, those are hands of iron. I mean, those are murderous hands. Those are hands that will kill you, kill others. You give in to anger. You become its tool. And it's a defilement, right? It's a bad tool. It makes bad things. See, tools, usually we use them to make good things. This one makes a bad thing. It makes crime. Crime of passion. Have you ever heard of that? We have so many little different ways we like to put labels on things, but without understanding how to avoid those things, for example. Like, why would you think that would never happen to you if you don't have any skills? Why would you assume that? Well, that's what the Padujana assumes. But the Padujana is not skillful, just like normal. It's normal to suffer. It's the most standard thing there. It's the starting point. So now you might say, well, that's fine, being normal. But the degrees of suffering really don't fit the crime, right? The punishment doesn't fit the crime, but it does in a comic way, but that is beyond your comprehension. But that's what foolish people do. They don't realize the consequences, the true consequences of their actions. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. But wisdom can give you that before you do something. You can also learn vicariously. You can learn by creating literary excursions that are highly complex and nuanced and meaningful for you, just to teach you yourself that anger is not good, that anger is foolish. Read about it, do it, and avoid it, right, in complex ways. Disable it, and also go from its path. Don't do it yourself, and also avoid angry people, or avoid angering people, knowing that people can get angry for the stupidest things. You know what wisdom will give you? Wisdom will give you a lot more awareness of other people and a lot more compassion for them. Even the worst of them, especially the worst of them. They're the ones that are most afflicted. They've been driven mad by their own thoughts, their own subnormal practice, their own misconceptions, their own delusions. Because they're delusional. What is delusional? I think I'm doing the right thing, but I'm doing the wrong thing. That's the definition. Do you know how many times I had to experience that myself in order to be able to see it? And just seeing it isn't enough in the theoretical realms. It's about practice, not seeing and reacting. When nothing is there, it's just air between individual parties, but someone can get angry about anything at any time for any reason. Something you would say, oh, I wouldn't get angry about that. The other people, it drives them out of their minds. They go to the point of murder. Courts are filled with people that don't know how to deal with anger. And yet some of the cases in which the people got angry, you certainly could say that they had reason to do so. There's been especially convincing cases, like, for example, how did this monk not get angry? That is that, but those are the stories we don't hear about. We hear about the stupid, foolish stories because they're more common, they're more normal. This person got angry and that happened. Not this person did this and this other person didn't get angry and in fact saw it from a wise perspective. You know, Manus didn't leave me. If Manus can live without Diogenes, then cannot Diogenes live without Manus? Don't need a slave. The slave, for example, do you think the slave was more annoying or less annoying? In the presence of Diogenes or not in his presence? When Alexander himself came, he asked him to stop blocking his son. So, but Manus got angry about something. And he went down in history as somewhat of a teaching tool. Quite an insightful, wondrous, witty, funny, light-hearted lesson about anger. As far as other religions go, the Buddha had to deal with all of that in his time, and in hindsight, how ridiculous those contretemps were between the religious men of his time, whose religions really do pale in comparison to his 45 years of teaching. His life, the biography of his life. Is just extraordinary. And yet, how did he manage the religious people of his time? Well, he completely disengaged from them. He did not insult them. He did not challenge them. He did not talk about them all that much unless they came to him with some type of sophist questions that again have gone down in history as some of the most ridiculous things that could have possibly happened to the Buddha. And yet the Buddha was living life as a man, so they threw all different types of things at him, which makes his life also all the more extraordinary. In every sense of the word. So when you say Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, that's the Buddha part. The more you know about the Buddha, the more inspired you will be. It's inspirational on every level. It's beyond any kind of normal existence. Everything he went through, he came from let's not forget, the top. He knew the top in and out, forwards and backwards, top down. He knew it better than it knew itself. He walked away from that and he went and walked into the gutter. And the gutter threw everything at him, including, if they had it at the time, some form of kitchen sink. The conditions under which he lived are unimaginable today. Especially starving yourself in a jungle. Just try that out if you think it's for beginners. And then come back from that. And then again, how did he manage his fame? He kept a low profile. Did not go into the cities. He did not go to the bank. He did not go to Caesar. They came to him. And finding him was probably not so easy before GPS in those parts. And maybe that's what was of great benefit to him. And of great benefit to the world, because what is accessibility in a subnormal time? What does that mean? Does that mean good things or bad things normally? Just playing the statistically for mathematically minded Brahmins. So I also look. The Buddha was not hostile towards the Brahmins. How could he be? He's the Buddha. So even they, being not so dense usually amongst the other Padujanas, could realize, look, the guy is not challenging our business model. They're walking around looking like rejects, samanas. And samanas were there before they came there, so what are they supposed to do? Take them out or something? Everybody knows what samanas are. Just retirees, right? Old tradition in those parts. Because to get there, they had to come from somewhere. That was just sort of the end of the line, which wasn't the worst place to die. And some people decided, well, we'll set down roots there, right? There. But as far as who was there first, I think they had a lot more respect for samanas than the Padujanas of today. They do not know what a samana is, nor do they have much understanding or compassion for someone that is not on the clock. And some social mechanisms are wound up real tight. And some of it's for good reason. Because they have to be. And yet, who you let in and who you keep out, those are all very important principles. Just like keeping thoughts in and keeping thoughts out. That's why there were city walls. Even smaller than city walls, just castles. This is the border. This is my world, my stuff. But if you can take that idea and get mobile with it, get light, not have a castle in the first place, and not go where foolish people are, well, is that not a solution that everyone could benefit from over, what is it now, 2,600 years. Major benefactors, his legendary, convinced practitioners with rave reviews, masters beyond all comprehension even today. So, but them being worthy became legendary usually by word of mouth. And so you also had a very limited exposure. And yet, there's a way of doing multiple things at multiple times in multiple ways that might result in a new way of disengagement from all aggravating things, one by one. You go through it, you shoot it down, boom, that, nope, click, clack. But you can only do that in samadhi, and samadhi requires virtue. And that's what people consider the hard part, and it is the hard part until it becomes habitualized, at least with the 5 precepts, and adding on as you go. And I do recommend, in this case, confidence that the precepts are true. If you're confident that they're true, then you'll confidently follow them. And it's more about confidence than blind faith. But blind faith can get, at least as far as this is concerned, if you blindly have faith that they'll work for you, you're right. If you're a simple person, you're going to have a lot less problems than a so-called smart person that runs themselves ragged around rationalizations why they can't follow the 5 precepts. So these people, they might have an IQ, like me, I have an IQ of 1,000, right? So these people with an IQ of like 200, they're just sort of spinning their wheels, the burning rubber, doing donuts around the 5 precepts. They can't manage to do it even for one day. And yet they think they're superior because they can rationalize. They got a lot of cognitive gibberish going, and they're failing to meet the first prerequisite, more or less, for samadhi. So it's like they're not putting the quarter in the pinball machine. They're not going to pony that up because they don't have it. Well, why don't they have it? Because it didn't materialize, because they weren't following the precepts. You follow the precepts, you do it a week, 2 weeks. It's a continuous thing. All of a sudden, you look in your pocket, you got 2 quarters in there for the samadhi pinball. So first quarter in, boop, 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 boop. Start off, you're not a good pinball player. It takes time to learn the ins and outs. What you got to jiggle, when, how, timing. You want the other metaphor, like riding a bike. You're angry, guess what? You're tilted. You're tilted to one side, so far to the side that you can't drive your bike, you fall off. Guess what? It hurts. You're now in anger. But you get back on the bike and now you start going to the left. It's about regret. It's about blame. You're too far left, you fall off the bike, you get hurt. You're in there, you're in suffering. But if you keep pushing through, you keep at it, then you'll be getting hurt. But see, this is where the bike metaphor breaks down. But the bike doesn't stop going. So it's like a motorcycle, just that you might recover. So you do go to the left, you do injure yourself on the left side. You do swing over to the right too far, but you're still driving. See, life is driving you. Nietzsche is driving you. And you're... encountering out of controlness. So there's the bump. Boom, that hurt a lot more than I thought it would. There's a tree. There's some barbed wire you pick up because you're riding too far on the right or left. Got to pull back up. Perfect precepts. You stay straight. You're not hurting yourself unnecessarily. You just decided I'm not going to lean too far. When I notice I'm going to the left, I overcorrect with right till I'm back in center. So that's my riding style now. I don't get hurt. Now sometimes when I'm riding straight, I'll still hit a rock real unexpectedly, but I'm gonna, and I might wobble left and right to recover. But I'm going to get back to center as quickly and as efficiently as possible. I'm certainly not going to be blaming life that happens, because anything can happen with out of controlness. Anything. And it has happened. It's just statistically improbable, but that doesn't matter. It still happened. I was driving straight for years and then I hit a rock. Well, it's then about recovery, isn't it? It's about getting back on beam. Not being thrown for loops. See, some of those people, they just live great lives. They do hit that rock. They don't know how to recover because they didn't start off wobbly. They didn't start off scraping on the left side for years. It just through an industrial wasteland type of pain, until one just like using every muscle in their half ripped off corpse of a right side got oneself back on track, and then quickly went to the right side, but that pain was actually less than the left side, but the left side was sort of old wounds, the right side's now the new wounds. Then you're okay, back to the left, and then you get straight up again. Okay, this is the way to ride, just straight and narrow. This is smooth, and see, then those samadhi wheels start rolling, frictionless, and that is then but the second, the room, the area of contestation is the room of spirituality, where you can evaluate and optimize. But that's too far. In the beginning, it's just going to be a free-for-all. Everything's going to jump on you, and you're just not going to know what's happening, actually. You're going to think it's a counterproductive waste of time. It's going to be the initial feeling, but if you stick with it, if you're able to have the confidence in the practice to stick with it, like I'm learning karate here, I understand as a white belt, it's going to be pretty boring, and I'm not going to have too many skills, but you work through the belts. At some point, black belt doesn't adequately reflect your skill set. Then there's some brown belts, but what's beyond that? At some point, it doesn't matter what belt. It's a belt that's unrecognizable to Padujanas. It's not something they're going to respect anyway. In fact, they might disrespect it. How many monks have been disrespected, do you think? Probably happening right now. There's 10, 20, 100, 1,000. Quite symbolic for just how the world works. And there's good, better, and less good monks, right? How about this? You can stop being a monk. Like you ordained, you said you're going to, stick with it, and you don't, you fly out. You don't hold, and you don't have any belt. You're beltless. Pants might fall down. Your komoto might blow off. And then you're just butt naked again, butt naked Padujana. So yeah, overthinking things. People that have an intellectual advantage, they think they actually have a disadvantage compared to simplistic, confident, faithful people. So what is perceived to be a weakness is actually a strength. In those rare cases where the confident connect with the supernormal. What a wise person sees when he looks back on his foolish life is one of the most shocking things. And yet that is why a wise person doesn't look at his past life. He just looks forward. He doesn't consider time to be relevant or determining overly much. You reach a new level of wisdom, you're not the same person you were that was foolish. And see, that's the not self part. See, the self part wants to stick that to you. But when you see it, you can break it, and then that false self just floats off into the ether. And then you're free. So at that point, it doesn't really matter what you did in the past. It's not connected to you. It's not connected to your samadhi practice or wisdom. You've upgraded your database. Like machine learning, you've gone through iterations of life. You've distilled the wisdom from those encounters, and not just the ones you directly encountered, but also vicariously via study, reading, comparative literature, however you want to do it. But through these multitude of infinite past lives, you can, or not just past lives, imagined lives, which gets us into the literary aspect of it. You could see it that way too. It doesn't have to be connected to you, it can be a life. The contemplation of lives without the connection to the self. That's what machines do. They do it mathematically. And the results are wisdom that they know. They've been trained. It's practically with infinity what works best and what doesn't. And then you can see this expressed as well in artificial intelligence, because it's using stratagems that have not been seen before based on the variables that life does throw at you. So what is the best thing to do here? Well, if you get rid of greed, ill will, and delusion, you can really function a lot better in that you don't have these attachments to keep you hindered. You will not do that, but sometimes we have to wait until we know what is the right thing to do. And maybe if you don't know, and you don't need to know, maybe you're in the right place for a time, but it's not going to be forever. It shouldn't be forever. Why are we so immobile? That's very contra natural for the Saka. So how did we get corralled into that type of lifestyle? Well, it does seem to be some type of property market that also happens to be very rapacious, that also happens to have really negative downstream side effects for social cohesion and other things, social morality, because it's just squeezing the fruit of all of its juice and leaving really nothing. It's milking the udders till they go dry all the time, and then just throwing the cows away and doing it, starting over with the new cows. Like, they have reduced the life cycle through these efficiency traps, and then they just increase the price. You have to pay $1,000 more per month. Well, how do you earn that? Well, you're supposed to work more, or yourself to death, or fall apart. Either way, they don't care. They're a shakedown scheme. They have efficiency metrics from a financial standpoint that don't include social aspects. Because these might be international investors, for example, that don't care what happens in your part of the world. As long as they get whatever products they want. They made some deals with a couple of people that don't care either. Well, then you have this type of social destruction in the name of some economic policy that finally only enriches very few people and impoverishes a multitude more. So again, systems change. So we had better systems, then they got worse. We thought they would continue getting better. Well, why did they get worse? Well, the leadership got changed out and not replenished or replaced with ever-increasing degraded versions of it. So we thought we had a resilient system. It wasn't. We thought the pool of clear spring water would remain pure, and they dumped a bunch of crap on top of the mountain, and now it's leached in. So you need to get rid of that, or get a new spring, or take some evasive action. But if you don't have the leadership for it, if you're stuck in some type of boxes, if you're on a grid, well, it's going to be more of the same or worse, won't it? It's really about management. Social management, bad social management, bad results. Who wants to be there? It's like a bad restaurant. You want to stay in there and just eat the crap that keeps getting worse? Just bounce. It's a big world. So will they get it under control? Will they not? What can you do? Well, you can live through systems and times just like everyone has since the beginning of time. This is just one iteration, one life, one version. And it won't remain the same. Perhaps it will get better after decades of degradation. Centuries of stupidity. Perhaps it's a mixed bag. Perhaps just one thing will make the breakthrough that will turn our future world around, so that we see good things happening all the time instead of just bad things. Maybe that can also start with a perspective shift when you radically change where you're looking and what you're doing. Looking at bad stuff, getting angry about it, boy, that does seem to go hand in hand as a stupid practice. Why not look to things that are satisfying and cultivate them instead? Sounds like a better practice, doesn't it? I think it does, doesn't it? It does make a lot more sense. But being ignorant and being misled and being titillated to look at certain things because they're supposed to be important. It's understandable how it happens, but you can also understandably get yourself out of doing that all the time just because it's not a good practice. It doesn't lead to the best of results. Certainly on a subconscious level, we think we've won a debate or something on a conscious level, subconsciously and realistically, we've done nothing. Which is why cognition and intelligent people and wordy people and literary people do need to see things comprehensively, not just get caught up in that world, or if you do, turn it into something that is beneficial to yourself and others. Why not? Why would a mixer of paints want to produce something that's crap? That's corrosive, that stinks, that doesn't transfer to the canvas or whatever surface you're trying to transfer the color to? Why would you do that? You would always learn what not to do, but you would still playfully experiment. That's part of the wisdom panya phase, when you have the aha, this blue mixes with this to make this, and this is better than that. So apply those techniques, apply those principles, and be patient. What a wonderful precept. Never hesitate to do good. Something the Buddha said. Because if you hesitate, you cultivate Mara mind. Because you'll find reasons, you see. The reasons against the good. The reasons against doing good. That's doubt. Hesitation. It's also a hindrance to do good. It's not good, it's bad. So just like you don't swat the mosquito, not because that wouldn't be an automatic thing for a Padujana to do. It's the small things that remind you about the bigger things. You're exact in the small, ludicrous things, like not slapping a mosquito because you're gaining insight of that very, 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 very valuable insight. Keeps you out of a lot of trouble. A lot of mind states that are potentially of limitless suffering. Certainly in the moment that one feels just overwhelming regret. That little lesson can keep you from that mind state. How valuable is it? And then there's also the seed of compassion in it as well, that the compassion for another life is just slightly greater than the automatic reaction to end it. That discipline to hold your hand is very valuable in other essential areas, and yet when this ludicrous lesson comes to you, it's just a way of sharpening your blade of Dhamma to a razor's edge, so that no matter how hard the dukkha is, it slices right through it like magic, because it's so sharp. The edge is not dulled, it cuts all the time. Just like sati all the time, Dhamma all the time, living Dhamma, which is to say living mastery over hindrances and sufferings. And then your ability to call upon it, because it's that sharp, it's that ready. that polished, that automatic. Because you're not even thinking about it because you've habitualized it because you trusted in what initially sounded like very odd teachings of the Buddha. So when they say Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, don't forget that they all connect to each other in an extremely meaningful way. Don't underestimate the richness of the Sangha, because people who have Dhamma and the Buddha, the other two, they're very rich, super normal individuals. Very rich, very generous, very well oriented towards the valuable things in life. Healthy people, as I understand them, good people, looking to get better from all of the suffering that life can throw at one, that one throws at oneself mostly. And that's the Dhamma part. What is in your control? You have it if you use it. And do look to the small and stupid things. I love the stupidity of the 5 precepts. The stupidity in the sense that they're not complicated. Even stupid people can understand it. And yet the smartest of us are always finding ways to talk ourselves into breaking the precepts. Isn't it the little devil on your shoulder that's whispering in your ear that you listen to and cave? And yet they're the stupidest 5 things in the world. They're so stupid, so easy, and yet why is it so challenging for some of us? When you were young, it was less challenging. Then you got older and you thought wiser, but you actually were on the wrong path. It wasn't wisdom. It was worldly cleverness, worldly persuasion, worldly illusions, delusions, and sufferings. Samskara, circles and circles, just wandering in the dark, blind as a bat. And yet thinking you know perfectly well what you're doing when it's wrong. And yet the 5 precepts would have saved you from all of that. Certainly would have. And so what a cheat code to get. Like, look, buddy, imagine it's a super complicated game called life, and somebody says, here you go, 5 things. This is a start. Do this. Even when you think it's not the right thing, it is. Just trust me on this. And see, the trust is not, this is not a con man that's trying to sell you some type of vacuum cleaner that maybe isn't all that well made and cost a lot. And I have some worldly reason for lying to you. But that's in there too, don't lie. Don't lie. And see, a lot of times we rationalize lying like, oh, we think lying is a way of getting our way. If we misrepresent something and then the person thinks they're actually getting the thing that we're misrepresenting, then we get what we want. So why wouldn't that be considered skillful? You can get into these sophist rhetorical schools, and that's all it is. It's what candidate appears to be more credible in a world that is subject to change and all different other things, out of controlness. So why not do the worldly beneficial things and all of that? That's the culture of worldliness that's existed in every culture, in every place, in every time. And there's the worldly world and the spiritual world. And they do intersect. So this is to say that behavior or unvirtuous behavior in a worldly sense does translate not if into worldly demise, but certainly into spiritual demise in the form of suffering. In the form of suffering that is part and parcel of a life that is not well led, that was subject to greed, hatred, anger, and delusion, egotism, self, deception. How about this general theme that to get rich is the goal in life? How many Westerners got that memo? If not explicitly stated, then at least that was what one was led to believe. Again, in some type of simulated neo-Calvinistic numbers game. More digitalized than it's ever been, just numbers. Then the culture's just going to happen somehow vicariously, or your life's just going to be one gigantic success. But first get wealthy and just don't really look into how that's done, because virtue is something that keeps you from becoming rich. What? Then how do you end there? And so then you end up discounting virtue to yourself. That's a very wrong way of doing it. Trust is important. Why is trust is important? Because if you're not trusted, there's no business you can do with anyone. And if you don't believe yourself to be a trustworthy person, how are you going to continue to play the role of a trustworthy person and be congruent with one's own principles? And certainly the principles of the Dharma, when they're incongruent. Well, there's a simple solution to that, is to make what was in a state of ignorance incongruent, congruent with the precepts and Dhamma. And that's when you do that, then you gain access to the reflective, meditative, focused, wise sorting out of things within samadhi, so that the result is wisdom. Wisdom not in a theoretical sense, rather wisdom in the applied sense, in that it is habitualized and automated, so that one has right view. For example, your right view, it's pretty good. It's like started off bad view, wrong view, and now it's sort of focused on very precise things, and not focused on other things that one used to focus on to a morose degree, which did produce unimaginable forms of suffering for no reason whatsoever that is good. Why would one hold on to a glowing hot stone when one can drop it instead and not pick it up again? You see how simple that can be? Well, do that with your thoughts now. Apply it to your life. And do it by degrees. Don't do it all at once. Don't snap, but maybe snap. Just imagine yourself snapping clear of all of that dead weight. Why not? Give yourself 5 minutes to just entertain the thought that it is possible. If you give yourself the permission to do it, and the Buddha gave you permission to do it. So don't forget the Buddha. It's a big part of the three. He did exist. He was a man.